he actually died more quickly than we were expecting. So we'd had some conversations about it, but perhaps not as many as we had planned. But we had talked about it, and so we'd started to grieve together for the life that we weren't going to have, and for the experiences that we weren't going to share together. But in all of that, it was very much James's attitude was very much, it's you I'm leaving behind. You're the one that's going to have to, who's got the hard thing. James was very aware that he was going to go to heaven, and in heaven he wouldn't be in pain. His tumour wouldn't be there. He would be well. He would have won the race more quickly, and I would be the one left behind, learning to live without him. So he grieved for himself, but actually much more of his sorrow was about leaving me behind to learn to live without him. Well, we became friends with Dimity and the rest of the palliative care team quite early on, when he'd gone back in after the tumour started to regrade, because he was experiencing quite a lot of pain. So he was they were quickly dispatched to introduce us to the exciting world of opiates. And so that was brilliant. They were great being there to sort out all the symptoms and give new drugs to deal with the side effects of the drugs that they'd given us the day before. And that was brilliant. Without them, the last 9 months would have been much more hard work. He was suffering from lots of side effects from the chemo that he was on, but at the same time, they were really encouraging him to get on and do all the things he wanted to do. So he actually was discharged from hospital on a Monday and went off to watch the World Cup in Germany on the Friday. And they just made sure he had everything he needed to do that and encouraged him to go and do it, which was amazing. It was brilliant because I knew that if there was a problem, if I was worried about something, if we were worried about something, we could go and ask them the question, ring them up, say, he's been throwing up for this long, and they'd say, yeah, you need to come into hospital. And then they would just sort it all out. And yeah, it was brilliant because they weren't just worried about James. There would always be the moment when saying, how are you, Sarah? Is there anything we can be doing? How can we help you? And it was just brilliant that there were people who took the time, had the conversations, and made us feel that despite all of this, it was about being human. It was about being a real person and trying to live life to the best way that we could. So encouraging us to leave the hospital, kind of their test for whether James was ready to go home was whether he decided he wanted to go out and have lunch opposed to eat the horrible hospital food, which was brilliant. It just made us feel much more like normal people, not just cancer patient and wife. It was a complicated situation in that we knew that this tumour and associated things that were going on with his body would kill him, but we didn't know how long it was going to be because of the way the tumour was behaving. But it was really clear to us that James's quality of life was deteriorating, and there weren't that many options. In fact, there weren't any options for further treatment. And we had said to the doctors, we don't want James to have any more treatment if this is the quality of life you can give him, because actually living in hospital isn't really quality of life. So we'd had those discussions saying if the choice is prolonging life in this state or allowing it to move into the just dealing with symptoms, then that's what we want. There is no point in prolonging life in this level of discomfort. But we were thinking that he had a while longer, and then things suddenly changed and he deteriorated. And then actually we went into hospital, thought that for a boring routine weekend in hospital, and it turned out that he was going to die pretty soon. So some of those conversations were preempted. We didn't have to get into those conversations because actually he deteriorated much more quickly. But we didn't know how we were going to face it. And it was hard and it was tough and it was incredibly painful watching someone who had previously been so full of life and fun and enjoyed being with people becoming weaker physically. So he was sleeping about 16 hours a day, not really having the concentration to do the things he used to love doing, mainly playing computer games. And because of the physical symptoms he was suffering, he didn't really enjoy spending time with people. So we were afraid of what was going to happen next and how we were going to cope. But we were both praying that God would enable us to deal with that, and that God would give us the strength. He'd given us the strength to deal with it. To that point, he'd given us the people to support us and help us to do that. So we didn't know what was going to happen, but we were trusting that God was going to be able to look after us in that. And as it turned out, he looked after us brilliantly. He knew us better than we knew what was going on. And so, through amazing circumstances, ensured that James was in hospital, being looked after by brilliant people. Before we realised that what was about to happen. We were enormously privileged that we'd grown up together, so we knew each other really, really well. So although we were only married for 6.5 years, we'd known each other for 25 years. But it was hard work. It was incredibly hard work for both of us to deal with the reality that our marriage would end more quickly than we had ever imagined. I've rewatched the wedding video since James died. He never wanted to watch it. And, you look at us, 22, all bright-faced, shiny, excited, saying, I'm going to promise to love you in sickness and health till death us do part. Not really realising quite the timescale that would be involved. And it was hard work dealing with all those emotions and the hurt and the pain. I used to sometimes hate going home from work because I knew that I was going to have to go home and deal with the person I loved so much being in pain or being miserable or just feeling tired and not having energy. But at the same time, we were incredibly close. We had to rely on each other and look after each other, because although I was looking after him physically, emotionally, all those kind of things, he was equally looking after me. It was a real partnership, even up to the very end. James's main concern was for my well-being. So actually the last thing that James said to me was the morning sort of before he died about 20 hours later, was him. I was explaining to him something, what was going on, and he just looked at me and said, "Don't worry," because I was wanting to make sure everything was okay, and he was clear enough. He just said, "Don't worry," and that sort of sums up how it worked. He would take care of me, and I would take care of him.